In the depths of space where stars whisper ancient secrets, there exists a truth that most civilizations refuse to acknowledge. Sometimes the smallest voices cry out the loudest, yet the universe pretends not to hear. Kavath pressed his six-fingered hands against the cold metal of the observation deck, his amber eyes reflecting the dying light of a distant sun. He was Zenithari, a species known for their exceptional hearing and their unfortunate position at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. For 3 generations, his people had served as communication specialists aboard various alien vessels, their sensitive auditory organs making them perfect for detecting signals across the cosmic void. Today, however, Kavath wished he could unhear what had just come through his station. The distress signal had arrived 14 hours ago from mining outpost Helix 9, a remote facility operated by the Quilaxian Collective. The message was simple but devastating. Catastrophic structural failure. 600 workers trapped beneath the surface. Oxygen depleting rapidly. Immediate assistance required. Kavath had forwarded the message to the Galactic Commerce Authority, the sprawling bureaucratic entity that governed trade and emergency responses across 17 star systems. He had marked it urgent. He had included all the necessary coordinates. He had done everything by protocol. And then he had waited. Now, standing in the cold silence of the observation deck, he held the response in his trembling hands. The words blurred as moisture gathered in his eyes. Request denied. Economic assessment indicates rescue operation exceeds projected value recovery. Outpost classified as total loss. Salvage rights to be auctioned following standard 48-hour waiting period. Kavath read it again, hoping he had misunderstood. But no, the message was clear. 600 living beings would die because saving them would cost more than the minerals they could extract. Behind him, the door hissed open. Torna, his supervisor, entered with her usual clicking gait. She was Krillian, her exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights, her multifaceted eyes catching every detail of the room. You received the response, she stated, not asked. How can they do this? Kavatha's voice cracked. Those are living beings down there. Families. Children. Torna's antennae drooped slightly, the only sign of emotion her species typically showed. The Commerce Authority follows economic logic. It has always been this way. You know this. But we have to do something. We have done something. We reported it. The decision has been made by those with authority. She paused, her mandibles clicking softly. I understand your distress, Kavath. Your people value life differently than most. But we are not in a position to change galactic policy. After Torna left, Kavath returned to his station. He pulled up the original distress call and listened to it again. The voice belonged to someone named Prixel, the outpost's senior engineer. The desperation was clear, but so was the hope. They truly believed someone would come. Kavath began composing messages to other authorities. Perhaps the Commerce Authority was just the first option. Perhaps the Unified Defense Coalition would respond. Perhaps the Merchant Guild had resources nearby. Perhaps someone, somewhere, would care enough to act. One by one, the responses came back. The Defense Coalition stated that Helix 9 was outside their jurisdiction and that they could not deploy military assets for civilian mining incidents. The Merchant Guild indicated that none of their vessels were equipped for heavy rescue operations. The Scientific Consortium expressed sympathy but noted that their research ships lacked the necessary capabilities. Each rejection felt like a physical blow. As the hours crawled forward, Kavath monitored the thin emergency channel that remained open to Helix 9. The signals grew weaker. The voices more strained. He heard Prixel trying to keep everyone calm, rationing the remaining oxygen, organizing the workers into groups to conserve their air supply. He heard parents singing to their younglings, traditional songs meant to soothe fear. He heard an elderly Quilaxian named Venshar reciting poetry, his voice steady despite the growing carbon dioxide levels. He heard hope slowly dying. Kavath had never felt so helpless. His entire species had been engineered for one purpose, to hear and relay messages across the stars. But what good was hearing when no one would listen? What purpose did communication serve when those in power chose silence? In the mess hall that cycle, Kavath sat alone, unable to eat. Around him, other crew members went about their routines, laughing, complaining about shift schedules, discussing the latest entertainment broadcasts. Life continued normally for them because this tragedy was happening somewhere else, to someone else. A young maintenance worker, a Havarian named Drist, sat down across from him. "You are the one monitoring the Helix 9 situation?" Kavath nodded. "My cousin worked on a similar outpost. These things happen in deep space mining. It is dangerous work. Everyone knows the risks. That does not make it acceptable to abandon them." Drist shrugged, his gill slits fluttering. "What choice is there? The galaxy runs on economics. Always has. Resources go where they provide the best return. A rescue mission to a Class 5 gravity world would require specialized equipment, expert personnel, massive energy expenditure. For what? To save workers who can be replaced?" The casual cruelty of the statement made Kavath's stomach turn. This was the reality of galactic civilization. Life had value only when it generated profit. That night, Kavath could not rest. He lay in his quarters, listening to the hum of the ship's engines, thinking about the 600 souls slowly suffocating in the dark. He thought about his own people's history, about the countless times they had been dismissed, overlooked, treated as expendable. He activated his personal terminal and began searching through old databases, looking for anything that might help. There had to be someone. Some species. Some organization. Someone who valued life over economics. His search led him down forgotten data channels, through archived records of past emergencies, through lists of registered vessels and their capabilities. And then he found something, a footnote in a report from 3 years ago. A mention of an unknown vessel that had appeared during a different crisis, a solar flare that threatened a research station. The report noted that this vessel had ignored standard protocol, had not requested permission, had simply arrived and extracted all personnel before vanishing again. The species identification was listed as uncertain, but there was a designation, human. Kavath had never heard of them. Kavath's fingers moved rapidly across his terminal, pulling up every fragment of information he could find about these humans. The data was sparse, scattered across obscure databases like breadcrumbs left by ghosts. Most galactic species maintained extensive records, detailed histories, trade agreements, diplomatic channels. The humans had almost nothing. What he did find was strange. There were incident reports, always brief, always incomplete. A cargo hauler under pirate attack suddenly finding the attackers fleeing in terror. A colony ship losing life support, then mysteriously receiving replacement parts from an unidentified source. A plague outbreak on a frontier world, followed by the appearance of medical supplies and personnel who refused payment or recognition. Every report ended the same way. The humans had vanished before proper contact could be established. The few physical descriptions varied wildly. Some reports claimed they were massive warriors, others described them as small and fragile. Their technology was listed as either primitive or impossibly advanced depending on the source. It was as if each observer had seen something completely different. One detail remained consistent across every account. When others had given up, when situations were deemed hopeless, when the economics did not make sense, the humans appeared. Kavath sat back, his heart racing with something he had not felt in days. Hope. But how could he contact them? There were no registered communication frequencies, no embassy, no trade routes, no diplomatic channels. The humans existed in the margins of galactic society, present but unreachable. He returned to the original reports, reading them with new focus. In the solar flare incident, the research station had been broadcasting on emergency frequencies, standard distress protocols. The humans had simply shown up. They had been listening. Kavith looked at his communication array, at the vast network of channels and frequencies that stretched across known space. The Commerce Authority monitored official channels. Every major species had registered frequencies. But there were gaps, unused bandwidths, forgotten spectrums that no one bothered with anymore. If the humans were listening, they would be listening there. He began modifying his transmission protocols, routing a new distress signal through abandoned frequencies, old emergency channels that predated modern galactic communication standards. He felt foolish doing it, like shouting into an empty canyon and hoping for an echo. But what choice did he have? This is Communications Specialist Kavith of the merchant vessel Brightness of Tomorrow, broadcasting on behalf of Mining Outpost Helix 9. 600 beings are trapped underground following a seismic event. Oxygen supply critical. All standard rescue requests have been denied due to economic constraints. If anyone is listening, if anyone cares, they are dying. Their location is. He included every detail he could: coordinates, atmospheric conditions, the specific equipment needed, everything. Then he sent it out into the void, through channels that officially did not exist, toward listeners he could not prove were real. Hours passed. The signals from Helix 9 grew weaker. Prixel's voice had become a rasping whisper. The singing had stopped. Even the poetry had faded into silence. They were in the final stage now, the time when the body begins shutting down, when consciousness fades mercifully away before the end. Kavith remained at his station, ignoring shift changes, ignoring meals, ignoring Torna's increasingly concerned visits. He kept broadcasting, kept hoping, kept listening. On the third day, his terminal chimed. The signal was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It did not come through standard channels. It did not follow proper protocols. It simply appeared on his screen, text only, direct and simple. Received your transmission. En route to Helix 9. Estimated arrival 14 hours. Tell them to hold on. Tell them someone is coming. Kavitha's hands shook so violently he could barely type a response. Who is this? What species? What authority? The reply came quickly. Does it matter? We heard them. We are coming. He wanted to know more, wanted confirmation, wanted details he could verify. But the connection had already closed. All he had was a promise from an unknown source, transmitted through channels that should not work, from beings that might not even exist. It was insane to believe it. It was insane not to. Kavith opened the channel to Helix 9. Prixel's voice was barely audible now, each word an effort. We are, still here, for now. Prixel, listen to me. I have made contact with someone. They are coming. 14 hours. You need to keep everyone alive for 14 more hours. There was a long pause. When Prixel spoke again, his voice carried the weight of broken hope rebuilt too many times. Who? The Commerce Authority changed their decision? No. Someone else. Someone who heard your call and decided to answer. Kavith, do not give us false hope. Please. We have made our peace. The younglings are sleeping now. It is almost over. Do not make this harder. I am not lying to you. I do not know who they are. I do not know how they will do it. But someone is coming. Please, Prixel. Ration what air you have left. Keep them calm. Keep them alive. 14 hours. Another long silence. Then, what choice do we have but to believe you? Kavith spent those 14 hours in a state between terror and exhilaration. He monitored every sensor, every detection system, watching for any sign of an approaching vessel. Torna had stopped trying to make him rest. Instead, she brought him food and water, standing silently beside him in what he recognized as solidarity. Other crew members had heard whispers of what was happening. Some gathered in the observation deck, curious about the mysterious rescuers. Others dismissed it as fantasy, the desperate delusions of someone who could not accept reality. The hours crawled forward with agonizing slowness. On Helix 9, Prixel had shared Kavitha's message with the trapped workers. Some laughed bitterly at the cruelty of false hope. Others clung to it with desperate strength. Venchar, the old poet, began reciting again, his words giving rhythm to their breathing, helping them conserve oxygen. The parents held their younglings closer, whispering that help was coming, even as the air grew thick and their vision darkened. 13 hours. 12 hours. 11 hours. Kavitha's detection systems remained empty. No ships. No signals. Nothing. He began to doubt. Perhaps the message had been a cruel joke. Perhaps he had imagined it in his desperation. Perhaps he had just made everything worse by giving them hope that would die along with them. 10 hours. 9 hours. 8 hours. The oxygen levels on Helix 9 had dropped to critical levels. Several of the trapped workers had already lost consciousness. The younglings were barely responsive. Prixel's transmissions had stopped entirely. They were out of time. Kavith stared at his empty screens, tears streaming down his face. He had failed them. He had given them hope and delivered nothing. Then every alarm on the ship screamed at once. Something had just appeared in the sector. Not approaching. Not decelerating from faster than light travel. Simply appearing, as if reality had folded and placed it exactly where it needed to be. The vessel defied every classification Kavith knew. It was massive yet somehow sleek, covered in angular plating that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Energy signatures radiated from it in patterns that made no sense, power outputs that should have been impossible for something that size. Torna gripped the edge of Kavitha's station, her antennae rigid with shock. What is that? The communication panel lit up. A voice, speaking in perfectly translated galactic common, calm and almost gentle. Helix 9, this is the USCS Nightingale. We heard you needed help. We are here. Start preparing your people for rapid extraction. This is going to be close. The crew of the Brightness of Tomorrow crowded around every available viewport, their various eyes, sensors, and visual organs straining to comprehend what they were witnessing. The human vessel, this Nightingale, hung in space like a dark promise, and from it came smaller craft, dozens of them, streaking toward Helix 9's surface with purpose that bordered on fury. Kavith watched his sensors with disbelief. The descent craft were punching through the atmosphere at speeds that should have torn them apart. The gravity that had made every other species declare the rescue impossible seemed to mean nothing to these humans. They fell like stones with intent, like meteors with minds. They will crash, Torna whispered beside him. Nothing can decelerate from that speed in time. But they did not crash. At the last possible moment, the craft flared with energy, reversing their thrust with such force that Kavitha's instruments registered shockwaves rippling across the ground. They landed hard, barely slowing, as if the planet itself should move aside for them. Through the thin connection to Helix 9, Kavith heard new sounds. Drilling. Massive, powerful drilling that shook the very foundation of the collapsed mine. The humans were not carefully excavating. They were not following mining safety protocols. They were tearing through solid rock like it had personally offended them. Prixel's voice crackled back to life, weak but amazed. Something is happening. We can hear them above us. The ceiling, it is opening. Hold position, came the human voice, still calm despite the chaos they were creating. We are coming through. Cover the younglings. There will be debris. What happened next would be retold in 1,000 different ways across 1,000 different worlds. The humans broke through the ceiling of the trapped chamber with controlled explosive force, sending calculated fragments of rock in safe directions. They descended on cables, wearing suits that looked more like armor than rescue equipment, carrying lights so bright they turned the darkness into day. The first human through reached Prixel, who later described the moment with trembling words. I expected a giant, some towering warrior. Instead, I saw someone barely taller than myself, but moving with absolute confidence. She removed her helmet, and I saw her face. Soft features. Kind eyes. She smiled at me, actually smiled, and said something in her own language that her translator rendered as, "Sorry we are late." Traffic was terrible. The humans moved through the trapped workers with efficiency that spoke of extensive practice. They assessed injuries with handheld devices, administered oxygen from portable units, applied medical treatments that seemed impossibly advanced. They were gentle with the younglings, one human producing small glowing objects from his pack, little lights that changed colors, distracting the frightened children while others worked. An elderly Quilaxian woman, barely conscious, asked one of her rescuers why they had come. The human, a young man with tired eyes, knelt beside her and spoke softly. Because you called. Because you needed help. Because that is what decent beings do. But the cost, she whispered. The economic calculation. The human's expression hardened, though his touch remained gentle. We do not calculate the value of lives. We calculate the cost of losing them. And that cost is always too high. They extracted all 600 workers in just under 4 hours. The humans had brought specialized carriers for the injured, warming units for those suffering from hypothermia, and enough medical supplies to establish a field hospital on the surface. They worked without stopping, without complaint, moving with a determination that bordered on rage against death itself. Kavith watched it all through his sensors and through reports flooding in from Helix 9. His heart swelled with something he had no name for. Not just relief. Not just gratitude. Something deeper, something that made him understand that the galaxy he thought he knew was smaller and colder than it needed to be. When the last worker was brought to the surface, when the last youngling was reunited with their parents, the human commander, a woman named Officer Reina Okonkwo, stood among the rescued and spoke to them directly. You were told nobody was coming. You were told your lives did not have sufficient economic value. You were told to accept your fate. Her voice carried across the assembled crowd, translated into a dozen languages simultaneously. Those who told you this were wrong. Not wrong in their calculations. Wrong in their hearts. Wrong in their understanding of what civilization means. She gestured to her crew, to the dozens of humans who had descended into danger without hesitation. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day of our evolution. Gravity that crushes. Weather that destroys. Predators that hunt. Diseases that ravage. We survived not because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because when one of us fell, others came back. Always. Every single time. Prixel stepped forward, his voice still hoarse. How can we repay you? We have nothing of value. The mine is destroyed. We are poor workers from a forgotten outpost. Officer Okonkwo smiled, and it was the kind of smile that held both warmth and steel. You already paid us. You survived. You held on when you had every reason to give up. You kept those younglings alive when the galaxy abandoned you. That is payment enough. She paused, looking up at the stars. But if you want to do something for us, remember this day. Remember that when the systems failed you, when the authorities calculated your worth and found it insufficient, someone came anyway. And when you see others in need, when you see someone abandoned by those who should protect them, you do the same. You go to them. Economics be damned. The rescued workers, all 600 of them, made a sound that transcended species. It was not quite cheering. It was not quite crying. It was the sound of broken hope being welded back together, stronger than before. Aboard the Brightness of Tomorrow, Kavath found himself weeping openly. Torna placed one of her clawed hands on his shoulder, her antennae curved in the Krillian expression of deep respect. "You did this," she said quietly. "You found them. You brought them here. I only sent a message. You sent a message when everyone else had given up. You kept trying when all logic said to stop. You believed in something better." Her multifaceted eyes glistened. "Perhaps we all need to believe in something better." As the human ships prepared to depart, they left behind supplies, medical equipment, and construction materials. They refused all offers of payment, all attempts at official recognition. Officer Okonkwo's final transmission was simple. "If you need us again, call. We listen to the frequencies others ignore. We hear the voices others dismiss. And we will come. Always." The Nightingale vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, folding back into whatever mysterious space it had emerged from. But something remained behind, something that could not be measured in economics or calculated in profit margins. Kavath sat at his station long after his shift ended, staring at the frequencies where he had first made contact. Other crew members approached him, asking questions. How had he known? How had he found them? What were the humans really like? He answered as best he could, but the truth was simpler than they imagined. He had simply refused to accept that nobody cared. He had believed that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone was listening. Someone who measured worth differently. That night, Kavath began composing a new message. Not a distress call this time, but a record. A testimony. He documented everything that had happened, every detail of the rescue, every word spoken by the humans. He sent it out through official channels and unofficial ones, through registered frequencies and forgotten bandwidths. The galaxy needed to know. Not just about the humans, though that was important. But about what was possible when beings chose compassion over calculation, when they measured value in lives rather than currency. Within days, his message had spread across multiple systems. Some dismissed it as fiction. Others called it propaganda. But many, especially those who worked in dangerous places, those who lived on the margins, those who had felt the cold indifference of economic logic, they listened. And they began to hope.